Howdy, my name is William.
And I'm Mason.
And we are On Topic,
A podcast where we talk about interesting things with interesting people.
Today we will be discussing language, a topic explored by the great ancient philosophers and those of more recent times as well, alongside the greats from many other fields. We've got linguistics in here, mathematics, even the computation stuff now with synthetic language and language models. We're gonna hit a lot of bases tonight.
Yeah, there's a lot to cover here.
Yeah. So, do you want to? Why don't you kick off? Because I think you have more. I think you have questions for this, and I'm working. I've been listening through audiobooks. I've been reading. I've been reading up on the topic. I've been immersing myself in the topic of language and whatnot, and I haven't heard. And this is not to say that I've explored it exhaustively, but I haven't heard anyone say the sorts of things that would be my inclination to think about it. And so I'm going to try to craft my own theory of language here tonight, and I want you to help me and work out the kinks in it.
Okay.
So will take longer, so you should start.
Fair enough. A lot of the way I'm going to approach this is just by asking questions. I have usually the way I go about these types of things is I just listen to my intuition on this stuff, which I'm assuming you do as well to an extent. But yeah, especially with language, I feel like it's been hotly debated for a very, very long time, but I also feel like it's simpler than people make it out to be.
Okay.
Which is a bold statement, I know.
It is.
And academics will get really frustrated at what I just said.
I mean, there are people who make the claim.
But yeah, I think the first thing I would ask you is, do you think that humans are predisposed to language? Do you think it comes naturally to humans?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. There are a few pieces of evidence for that. One piece of evidence for that is that there isn't a single human culture in the world. There isn't a single instance of humans where they don't have some sort of functional language. Mm-hmm. Would be the first tell for that. People talking to themselves would be a second tell for that. And the third tell is baby babble, right? We're talking before we even have or comprehend or understand language.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, I think it's got to be innate to some extent.
Okay, yeah. I would very much so agree with that. I think that there's even I hate to do this every time because it seems like kind of a cop-out, but not even a cop-out, it's just a little redundant sometimes, but from an evolutionary perspective, communication is one of the key components to the success of humanity. And if you can conceive of a language system, I think eventually it will just a very complex language system will just show up in, just statistically it's bound to show up at some time via natural selection, which again is very specific. It's kind of a miracle that it did happen, because I think we don't really have a reference point, but it does seem like it'd be a rare event. So yeah. I
mean, it's rare in that we are the only creature that does it out of infinitely many creatures.
It depends. We absolutely have much more complex systems than other animals do, but to deny that other animals have language
functional
systems
language, I don't know if I would go as far as language. There's a difference between emoting and language. Although I don't know that much about animal stuff.
But would you say that baby babble is emoting or language?
I would say that it's an imitation of language. I don't know that it's I wouldn't say that it's actually language yet, but I just think that it points toward the fact that we have a predisposal toward language. I don't think it's language.
Fair enough. Okay. I gotcha. Yeah, so I guess we should probably set some fundamentals here, in that when we're talking about language, how do you want to separate complex language and more inherent just communication, very primal communication?
Right, the question being what is language?
Yeah, so how do you differentiate dolphin clicks, right, which is very clearly communication.
Right.
Or dolphin noises, because I don't think they're limited to clicks, but dolphin speak. How do you differentiate that?
It's going to mimic a dolphin, but it's not going to go well.
How would you differentiate something like that to something as complex as the English language, which you have to spend years and years and years and years getting proficient at?
there's a tie here could be drawn between the between our conception of consciousness, right, and our conception of language. You could suggest that language has to be driven by consciousness in order for it to qualify as language. And the way that we had been talking about consciousness was discussing a sort of metacognition, right? I mean, I guess the definition that we landed on was that consciousness is the thing that experiences. But before that, and I think the dictionary definition was something more along the lines of like being aware of what goes on in one's own head.
Right.
And so then language would be maybe conceptualizing or communicating what goes on in one's own head, framing it in an interpretable way. And so if you don't have metacognition, then you can't have language, I think.
Right. So, right. Okay. So you're saying that it's the communication of your own thoughts and not just instincts.
Or conceptualization. I would suppose that a person in complete solitude would still formulate a sort of language. I don't know if it would be a spoken language or a signed one, but I think that they would develop a language internally. I think it's just how we're wired.
Right, and we can get to this later as well, because that's a big thing with whether or not. Let me see what I had a really nice way of saying this. Yeah, so is language used for communication or thought?
Right, and I think it's both. I don't think it's a clean-cut line between the two. I bumped my mic with my nose.
Hope that goes through. It'd be funny. But yeah, I think so. I think that language itself is. I find it easier to correlate it to the idea of just like communication alone. And thoughts are things that you have here, but language can help you communicate your thoughts. So I think on
clearly we think in language.
Yes. Yeah. So you can make an argument that. So that's what I'm saying. What would happen if you had a room with someone who just blank slate situation?
Right. Person in the white room.
Yeah.
Again, bringing them back.
Yeah. Would their own thoughts? Would that be in an audible language? And why was sound used as the form of communication as well? That's another thing I wanted to ask at some point.
I don't know that the person in the white room's language would be audible. I see no reason that they would vocalize or sign it or whatever, because it's not communicative in this case. It's purely intrinsic. It's just a way that they're conceptualizing things.
Right, but that thing in your head, where would that come from? Because like if you are fluent in sign language, say there's a society that just uses sign language and that's it.
Right.
If you're thinking about, would you have thoughts and picture the signs for those? Or would you, because like when I'm, trying to think of something, I do think in English, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think in English. If you had somebody in that room or had a sign language society, would they think in sign language? What would their thoughts actually be structured like in their mind?
I would guess that they would be thinking in written word.
Sure. I mean, for the blank white room example, I feel like I would be more inclined to say that no language would actually be developed.
It'd have to be something. I mean, because like, what is language, right? Really?
I think language comes about by just pure social interaction. I think it's one of those things that's just passed down. I think you learn it from
people think about things, man. You're not going to stop people from thinking about things. If you have a person in an environment, they will be thinking about it. And so if you're on your own, right, you're going to feel something. You're going to feel some sensation or see something. And because we're people and we do pattern recognition and we like to keep track of things and organize and whatever, we're going to categorize these experiences, these sensations, these things that are around us, these phenomena we're going to put them in little mental boxes. And that categorization that we're doing, right? Like naming is the first step that has to come in for language to happen. You know, in the simplest forms of language, you like you have a grunt, and that grunt means, ow, I've been hurt.
Right.
I am experiencing pain.
Yeah.
And then you expand on that and whatever, and you specify with more specific noises for specific types of pain and grow out and whatever. And I don't know if this was actually the first thing, I'm just spitballing, but that sort of thing, right? And so as you experience sensations, and as you compartmentalize things that you're seeing, things that you're feeling, whatever, that is naming, right? Because naming, when you name something, when I decide to call water water, it's not like it's a particular thing. Right, I'm not talking about that water.
When I talk about the form of water.
When I name water water, yes, I'm naming the form. And so every name, even the particulars, because then it would be for all things in the set of Mason, and then trait. But it's just a set of one. But every name is a set. It's a category.
Right, yeah.
And so because we do pattern recognition, because we will necessarily categorize in our minds in any environment we're in, even if there's no stimulus, then we're going to be categorizing. And the name is just a formalization of the category. And in order to conceptualize the category, you're going to name it somehow. It could be a grunt, or it could be just like a color in your mind. I don't know. But you're going to categorize, and then you'll name that category, and that naming is language.
Okay. I see why you would think that. I think of it more as sorry, my throat's going right now.
How dare you?
I think of it more as kind of a blank slate scenario. I really do like the idea of a blank slate. It comes up quite a bit. But yeah, on the topic of the white room thing, I think like thinking of it from a blank slate perspective, I think it's much easier to think that there's that humans have inherent points of communication, and those usually are the things that spawn all of the, you know, excess language that comes from that. So for example, I get punched in the stomach, right? Like
yes.
They make a noise, right? It's very inherent. It just is something that comes with being a human. If I'm sad, you could cry, right? There's a lot of just inherent vocalizations that you have as a human. It's just part of your nature. And over time, the accumulation of those, like every person is going to have those inherent ones, but how you build off from that and how you get more stuff from that is by communication with other people. So I think the person in the white room would have obviously the inherent, you know, grunts and stuff like that. They would be able to do that. That would be very normal, but I don't believe that they would actually form any system of language beyond that unless they had some other stimulus in the room.
They're not going to not be thinking about stuff, even if you're on your own, because this is what's so cool about metacognition. This is why consciousness is the condition for language. I'm deciding now myself. Right, is when you have metacognition, when you're aware of your own thoughts, when you see what's going on in here, that gives you the ability to form an internal dialogue. It's not one way. You confer with your thoughts, and it goes back and forth. You think, and I don't think this is a social thing. I think that and I guess we can't prove this in ethical ways.
Yeah.
Some more water. I think if you have a person who's got zero exposure to any other people, they're still going to be talking. They're still going to be thinking to themselves. They're still going to be talking. They're still going to be running that internal dialogue. It'll be much simpler, obviously. It won't be like a complex language in the sense that English is, but I think that they will be expanding upon ideas and names. I think they'll be naming things and categorizing, and then those categories will both refine. But you don't have anything and also expand upward.
To categorize. That's my problem with that. Is like if you are devoid of all, like I was imagining like if you just gave a new planet Earth right,
Yeah.
and had one human on it, would they
Right.
develop language? Maybe. I'll give you that. Maybe. I think there's a chance. I think it's a low chance, but I think it's a maybe because at least they have other things in the world to experience. But if it's just a completely like, sensory devoid environment, I don't think you'd have anything to categorize or even build anything
Still
off.
have thoughts though.
I mean, we talked about this before in the previous one. I actually don't think you would. I think because you even said consciousness is that which experiences, but if you don't have anything to experience, then I don't think you can have consciousness.
The body, it's you don't just get stimulus from outside though. You get stimulus from your body. You get sent hormones. You get sent, whatever. Like I'm assuming that the person in the white room can still move.
Right, but that's sensory input.
Right.
That in itself, like me being able to feel this table is sensory input. Me being able to feel my own, but like if you were just a brain in a vat, I don't think you wouldn't have thoughts.
So is this a person in a white room or a brain in a vat?
Well, the person in the white room has some level of sensory experience.
Right.
So if it's that, I will grant you again, maybe, maybe, but it's a very, very low chance.
I think our white room person would like jump a little bit and be like, huh. and that would be the name for that sort of thing. And then they can, lie down and be like, huh.
Right.
This will be, and it'll build from there. They'll be like, I feel like this if I do this thing, and I feel like this if I do this thing, and whatever. And
sure. Yeah, I think
they'll start to group them.
Right. So I think in the white room example, then yes, I think, but I don't know if they wouldn't develop any, or at least very, very little complexity to their language. Again, but all those things are, I feel like those are the very next step up, just like slightly from just inherent human noises.
The thing, the part where it gets fun is I feel like once they've started doing that, once they've built a habit of that, then it'll start, the order will flip, right? And then they'll think, and then they'll jump, right? The intent will come first, and the intent will come with the name for the thing.
Mm-hmm.
As they conceptualize it, they'll go, and then lie down. And as that happens, again, the groups refine and the categories, the list of categories expands, the set of sets expands. And as that happens, you get language. You get complex language.
Again, I can't like disprove you on that, but I find that would be, I feel like this person would be essentially brain dead. I don't think they would have much going on. Besides that, obviously that's just because oh no. Maybe I should pause for a second.
I hit the cable. We'll see. I don't
know. But yeah, I don't think that. I've obviously you look at humanity very differently than I do, right? You have much more of a divinity to man than I do.
This is true.
Which could very well be the reason why you think that, but I can't really say anything against it other than my intuition tells me that they would be essentially a brain dead.
I've been working
person wandering around a room
on secularly amicable terms thus far. I certainly, if we're bringing God into the picture, which I think ought to be done, but in these hypotheticals, although I suppose I would have to posit that God is a necessary being. So,
well, I was saying that your conception of God and your acceptance of God is influencing your intuition to make a conclusion like that.
If I'm thinking about God, though, if I'm bringing that into the picture, then it's like, well, yes, obviously, because your conscience is imposed by God and you will have some sort of interaction with the divine. You'll have inclinations, inspiration, this sort of thing, which will certainly give you a subject for language.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I feel like even without thinking about that, it still applies. I will grant you, however, and this is going to be the first axiom of my thing that I want to build with you. I do think language is necessarily referential. It cannot exist in and of itself. It has to exist in reference to other things.
Explain. You mean like the structure itself can't?
Language. There can
so you're saying like if you had an empty universe, language wouldn't be possible?
Well, no, because the thoughts can be the subject, like we were just talking about with the white room. But I do think that for there to be language, there has to be a subject of the language. Just like for there to be an experience or Sorry, for there to be an experience, there has to be an experiencer. For there to be language, there has to be something the language is referencing. If there's nothing, then there can be no language if there's nothing to be referenced.
Sure. Yeah. It's very. I don't think a counterexample would be possible to that. But I also think that's so fundamental that it I don't think I can deny that.
I think it has to be true. Like, given all of the things that given what language is, I think it has to be the case.
So it has to have. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. I don't know if you can actually draw any reasonable conclusions based off of that, but I think it. Yeah, I think that has to be true. I could also quickly, just because we were talking about what the catalysts for language are. I was researching theories on, the origin of language. And I came across some genuinely good stuff, like the Chomsky theory for universal grammar. Which
I was looking into him also.
Yeah, which is basically just saying that language is inherent to humanity.
I got the Baby Babel example from him.
Yeah. But yeah, also with that, the most important thing for that, and we can get to this later because we're going to talk about programming languages and stuff like that. Stuff like that. The important part about that is that you have an imperfect input for learning a language, right? You have limited information. You don't have a complete idea of the language, yet you still pick up on the language, right? As a newborn, for example. Right? Like you're not, you could have...
Yeah. There's a term for this. There's an old philosophy term for this. Something deprivation. I don't remember.
Yeah, anyway. But I also, alongside that, came across some other theories that are much more evolutionary based. And I thought that they were the naming schemes on these are bizarre.
Okay.
So the first one that I came across was the Bow Wow theory.
All right.
Which is essentially that that humans get their drive to, or at least the initial thing for language, had come from animal mimicry. So
interesting.
In nature,
but we are animals. Why does it have to come from other ones? Why can't it come from our own noises?
Right, but for example, a prehistoric word for a dog, right, could be a bark sound.
Right.
And that could be the word, right, the name of
dog.
Okay,
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So you see things or the sound of a rock falling could be the name for a rock. Right, and then you have these things, and people use the same things for the same things, and then it goes on.
You're right.
The second one is the poo-poo theory.
Okay. Bow wow and poo-poo.
Yep.
Is it spelled like that?
Like Winnie the Pooh with an H.
Ah.
That might actually be an incorrect pronunciation of that, but essentially what it is just
a hilarious idea that you're mispronouncing their theory in that way.
Which is what we were talking about before, where language can possibly come from instinctual noises like grunts and stuff like that, and then it just kind of builds from there. There's also the yo-he-ho theory.
Okay. This is wild.
Which is specifically grunting from labor. So as you're picking up a stone,
I thought you meant child labor.
No, no, that'd
be
wild.
Child labor is the wrong term. Child birthing, that sort of labor is what.
Yes. Yes. No.
If you're adult labor.
Yeah. So I don't think that's. I mean, that's again. I think the two previous ones are kind of the exact same thing. I think they're very intertwined in that. But the other one, which is interesting, is the la theory, which
linguistics is not a serious field.
I know they had a lot of fun naming these.
Crazy.
But essentially, that is
we got to name my one something fun.
That it's basically everything that comes from anything related to playfulness. So that could be laughing. That could be showing love to somebody. That could be music as well is included in that. So you could say that language originated from from the human drive to create music. And so you use your own voice to create music.
Interesting.
And thus certain songs are associated with certain things or certain So it bridges from there. And I think that's interesting but implausible. I don't think it's real. I don't think that's how that happened, but it is a very interesting idea.
I mean, there's an extent to which I can see all of that being the case. I mean, all of that. I see no reason that these things are mutually exclusive. I feel like the correct theory would be a combination of all of those things. It's like multidimensional, multi-angled. Why would it have to come about one specific limited way?
Yeah, you could say that the real answer is a accumulation of partial sums of each of those theories.
Sure. I am kind of partial to the last one though, because it rests on, I'm gonna blame the urge to make music on divine inspiration and the mimicry of the divine,
right?
Which is fun because then we get the axiom that language is gifted down to us as an innate thing from the divine, which makes sense because then it would be there so that we could pave the way conceptually to a point where we could understand and receive scripture.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is nice.
Yeah, that works well.
Yep.
I have a question about aliens.
Okay. Shoot.
So
shoot them.
My question is, if we contacted an alien civilization
shoot them.
Where their language was unintelligible.
Shoot. Sorry.
Is that even possible? Right. So if there was an alien civilization that had, is it possible for their language to be completely uninterpretable by humans? Or do you think there's something about language itself that we would be able to pick up on stuff?
Well, I mean, if it's happening, if they were hypothetically to be speaking telepathically, like if they're just thinking thoughts to each other, that could hypothetically be happening in language, and we wouldn't have any. If we don't have any way into it, then
I'm thinking that the language itself is tangible.
Okay,
but
if it's
uninterpretable.
Tangible, I don't think so. I don't think it could. Because language implies order. Language implies a pattern, and you could have theoretically an infinitely complex pattern insofar as it can be conceived of by the beings conceiving it. But
would that be possible? Probably not.
But it's got to be, even if it's infinitely complex, it's still got to be infinitely complex in an ordered and consistent way that can be mimicked by all of these beings. And so, no, I think it would have to be interpretable if it's language, because language is order. That's like the whole thing about language is that it's interpretable.
Right. I will say I'm not super comfortable with saying that language is order. I think that that's a little spotty because language has ambiguity.
It's not order itself, but it's a manifestation of order.
Right, but I think it's very important to note, to at least say that it must be, all forms of language we have now are imperfect. They are not. Sure. They are ambiguous to some extent.
That's true of everything. Math. This is true of math. This is true of physics.
Logic, you would.
Things experience entropy.
Logic, if you're thinking of it as a language, is not ambiguous. And you can conceive of systems that are unambiguous, which is exactly what happens with programming languages.
Well, okay, so what exactly are you meaning by ambiguity?
As in, if you have the same sentence, that sentence can mean two different things. In, obviously, layman's terms, but yeah.
Sure, but then you have other cues that signify which of the things it means, and that's also part of language. Those indicators are part of the language that drives to that, the ambiguity.
Right, but
isn't, for example, not there. It's just a deeper level of indication.
Even with those types of things, right? If you had two people trying to interpret someone, saying something with body language, with breaks, with whatever, right?
Right.
I feel like it is absolutely like not even possible, but also like very common for someone to have a complete incorrect interpretation from what the speaker was intending, right, from another person.
Sure.
So if you had two people listening to the same speaker, right, one person picks up on a joke, the other person doesn't, right? I feel like that in and of itself. If that language was perfect, then anyone who understands that language would be, or if that language was unambiguous, everyone who heard that thing would say, okay, this is what that means.
Sure, and I guess this is where the artistic component comes in, where the playful component comes in, right? Because we were talking about even with the back in the beauty one, right? Like order is good. Order is intertwined with the good things, with the divine essence. But if you have order pointed toward its own end, if you make an idol just out of order itself, then you run into problems, and then the order loses then there's no beauty in the order. I'm going to posit the same thing with the order here. I feel like if you have absolute, perfect, complete order for order's own sake within the context of your language, like you get with synthetic languages, then you lose the beauty. Then you lose the beauty of it. You lose the other things. You lose all of the other aspects. You lose the love. You lose the beauty. You lose the moral value. You can't actually play that. You can't interact with it in the same way. You can't. It's not an extension of your will.
Sure, right. But you were saying, so language has to be an extension of your will?
No, because good language.
Right, but language you think is divinely inspired, or is that divinely? Yeah, divinely inspired by God. Right, and if God is,
I'm posing this plausibly.
Right, I'm just saying. I think it's
partial
much more,
to the idea.
I think it's much more conceivable of an idea that language itself just is, because humans are imperfect, that language, and as being a creation of humans, is also imperfect. In that it is ambiguous, and I also agree that that's great, that's beautiful, that's fantastic. I'm very glad that there is room for interpretation when it comes to the language. It can be very boring otherwise.
So, okay, here's something I'll throw at you. Language and thought, in the way we've been talking about them, and also in the works of a lot of other people who've been talking about them who know things,
I know things.
Are deeply intertwined. Right? Because you think in language, and your language does impact the way that you think. You get like the direction that you read will be the direction that you conceptualize time. Like people who read left to right will put past events to the left and future events to the right. Places that read up to down will do it that way, and right to left that way.
Yeah.
Super interesting. Has some funny fallout in like marketing and stuff. But anyway, right. So language, you think in language, and your language affects the way that you think. And so if you have no wiggle room at all in your language, if you can't use it in varied way, if it's not an open game, then I feel like that may well be a direct limitation of your actual will. Like, I don't think free will can exist if you're thinking in a strictly bound synthetic language. If there's no ambiguity, then there's no room for variation of thought. There's no room for creativity of thought, which means that you're a machine.
I think that...
Which could be part of why we can't simulate consciousness. We can simulate consciousness. Why we can't create consciousness.
I think that I take issue with the fact that you said that you don't think people could have free will if they'd had a completely unambiguous structured language.
Well,
like, even if it is a synthetic language, I think you can have that. And things like context-free grammars, which is a thing in computer science. You can have a context-free grammar be equivalent to another context-free grammar.
What is a context-free grammar?
It's very difficult to explain without pen and paper. But it essentially,
sorry,
every time. Yeah, so in essence, it's a way of structuring a sentence for programming languages. It is the
this is like
structure.
for FOL stuff where you have like you'll have like the name and then the first thing and then the second, or the trade and then the second thing, and you'll have like 8 meg Greg, right? And it would mean like meg 8 Greg, 8 ATE.
I don't think so. No, I don't think that's what that is. It's not. It's like strictly a computer science thing. It's not like it might not. I don't know if it exists in linguistics. I don't think so. Because it's like it's purely humans don't. I mean, yes, to a certain extent we.
I think first order logic functions through context-free grammar. I mean, if I'm interpreting the name correctly and what you've said about it thus far.
Okay, so you have what they call rules, right? So I can name a rule S, right?
Right.
The start rule. And I can say S can be one of these two things, and most of the time there's an option for it to be empty. So you can just have it be nothing. But, and you can build out from there. So you'd have the rule sentence, right? We're trying to build a sentence. And then sentence would be a structure where you have like, what's the structure of a sentence? I forgot all this
Subject,
from second
object,
grade.
verb.
Right.
In
You
some
have
language.
those.
That's not us though. Subject,
Right.
verb, object. He ran to the subject, verb, object.
Subject, verb, object, sure. Right? And you can define subject, verb, object to be their own rules, right? So you have those next to each other, or you can have it be empty or whatever, right? But those things break off into new rules, and those can expand into things. So you have a structure that gives you 3 other rules, right, one after the other, but those rules themselves have rules that expand into other things. So you could have sentence. It's basically like a hierarchy of structures.
Okay.
So you have sentence, which breaks into this, which breaks into this, which breaks into that. And you can go by each rule that it broke into to get even more and more final. Like if you had subject, subject would be noun, proper noun or proper noun. You could pick either one, and then if you go noun, it'd be a list of all nouns, and then
right,
whatever. You can go from there.
Okay.
So in the using context-free grammars, you actually can have 2 context-free grammars that are different than each other but function the same. So it's basically like 2 ways of saying the same thing, which is cool. In fact, there's transformations you can do on context-free grammars to put them into something called Chomsky's normal form.
Okay.
Which is a standardized thing you can break basically any CFG, context-free grammar, can be turned into a CNF, Chomsky normal form. Any of them can be done through that. So I guess if you're saying, you could make an argument to say that these are just equivalent, and that I'm not saying that there is some level of interpretability there. Because you were saying that people, you like if you were saying that someone who had to use a synthetic language, that is a synthetic language.
Right.
You can conceive of a synthetic language using CFGs, but there are multiple ways of representing a CFG that's equivalent.
So here's another possible problem.
Okay.
Right, is that language is... I'm having a strangely hard time forming my thoughts with this, but because the way that the sort of language that we use, ordinary language, the sort of language that we speak, has this room and this flexibility and whatever. And what we're pointing toward with it, often, I would posit, are things that exist outside of this plane. We're pointing toward forms. We're pointing toward the divine. We're pointing toward things that don't... We're talking about perfect circles. There is no perfect circle. Mm-hmm. We're conceptualizing things that cannot exist here. And we can't hit those perfectly. We can't perfectly describe with language that's designed referentially from things that we're experiencing within the context of the world, which is finite and flawed. We can't wholly describe something that is infinite and flawless. We can't describe things that are outside of this plane of experience with language that is extrapolated from this plane of experience, which I'm not ready to say confidently that language is, but maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly you would say that it is. And so if you have a language with super strict set bounds where you can only say one thing with one statement, then that would take away the ability to, like, because we can't directly talk about the thing that we're pointing toward, we have to just sort of dance around it instead and shoot around the target in the dark and hope something hits. And I feel like you need the flexibility to do that. I feel like if you're locked strictly into the systems that are set by a language that's extrapolated from things that we're experiencing in this world, then the highest extent of thing that you can talk about with your language are things in this world, because you can only say one thing with whatever you're saying, and those things are all things that are here in the world because the language is of the world. And so you lose your ability to talk about anything higher.
I don't know if that's. I don't know.
I'm not even sure if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I can't think of a human actually speaking a synthetic language. That doesn't really. I can't really conceive of that in my head.
Well, I mean, I don't want to say speak, but you know first order logic, yes?
I mean, I know mathematical logic, which surely is good enough for that.
Surely you've come across first order logic in your stuff. I think you have. Well, conceptually, I would imagine that you could imagine thinking in first order logic. You could imagine thinking in a synthetic language. Maybe not speaking it to people, but you could conceptualize the world through a synthetic language. You could think in first order logic.
Logic is tough because so what you're saying is, if say you're defining a proposition, you're saying that proposition has to be worldly.
If you're speaking in first order logic, I think it has to. Maybe.
Okay, so God is not worldly, but I could conceive of using the term God.
But you wouldn't have anything that you could define it with, and because you don't have because you can't use terms for things that they don't mean, you can't use love to refer to something that's not actually strictly wholly love.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you can't talk about anything because we can't wholly describe any sort of essence. You can talk wholly about like a physical object, but anything abstract you lose if you have to mean exactly what you're saying by your language.
Sure. Yeah. Fair enough. I think I'm on board. I don't think it's tough to it's tough to decide what the outcome for that would be. I'm still strong. It just like there would be no scenario where a human would exhibit a synthetic language. It just is not possible.
It's totally possible.
I don't think it is. I don't think it's possible. I don't think that that's how the human brain is wired. There's a level of randomness to the human brain that I don't think you could be, and it wouldn't mesh well. There'd be so much, there's friction somewhere.
I'm open to this idea, actually. You think that people would necessarily reject the structure and start misusing it?
Yeah, I don't think I don't think it would be possible for a human to ever speak an unambiguous language.
I think this makes sense. I think this is plausible.
Yeah, and my argument for that would be that humans are imperfect, as most things are, as everything is for the most part, and that's where that comes from. But
my argument would be breath of life. This is why we're not machine. This is the consciousness thing. This is what we were talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
Very interesting.
Mhm.
That was fun.
Yeah. Cool. Well, do you want me to talk about programming languages at all? Do a quick 5-minute crash course on what happens
Sure.
with programming languages?
Seems
Because
like you want to do that.
I find
so.
it, well, I mean,
I'm just kidding.
so
Yes,
I have
think
some
you should.
stuff down that does relate it to
Okay.
to that, because I think that, again, when I was preparing for the podcast, I thought to myself, I think that the one distinguishing factor between programming languages and natural languages is ambiguity. I think that is the one thing that separates
Okay.
the programming languages from natural human language. Now, I should specify, programming languages are technically possible to be ambiguous. In
I was
fact,
just about to ask.
they have been done. I will talk about a very specific example that I know very little about, but I will at least mention it. But in essence, programming languages function very similar to human languages by structure.
Yeah.
So starting from the ground up, we recognize characters like letters and stuff like that, which represent, it's basically the same thing if you're thinking about just spoken language, because written language is, I don't think, super important here, to be completely honest.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so you have some type of input handlers, what they say, which is essentially just a character interpreter. Not interpreter, but it just has, you can see that an A was given to you, and you can just accept that A or reject that A.
Okay.
That's all it does. And then you have a thing called a get token, which is a function. Tokens are incredibly important. They are essentially just words. Now, the cool part about programming languages, right, is if, for human language, timing is an aspect of this, which is weird how it deals with that in programming languages. Because, if I said, what's a good example of this? If all I told you was in, what do you get from that? Just in.
Right. So
that's all I said is in.
What
You're gonna say, okay, well, he said the word in.
I get two things. I get one of two. I have to assume one of two things. I have to assume either it's a command, or it's a statement, and I'm waiting for a subject and an object.
So essentially, I'm thinking of it like I'm saying in, and I'm pausing.
Right.
But then I'm unpausing. I'm saying put. Input. You get that? There's a
this wasn't even an option of mine.
So there's a level, there's a distinction of time, but as I'm saying input, you can think about it happening in slow-mo. Your brain is cycling through the possible words that could be going. Essentially what a programming language will do is wait for the entire word and then select whichever the longest word that it sees as a valid word is. So it would wait for me to say input and then a space. It would wait for that break. And then once it sees the break, it chooses, once it gets to a point where it can't recognize a longer word, right? There isn't a word that is longer than what we've currently got to, it'll select that as the word. Right? Which is kind of that's what your brain does as well, for the most part, right? But with an aspect of time, which isn't really a thing that happens in with computers. Then you have a parser, which is a CFG. A CFG is parser logic.
Okay.
Not all of them work with CFGs, but essentially, it's interpreting. It's putting a structure to. It's basically building a sentence. It's putting a structure to what you've just given me. Right. So if I gave you a sentence, you'd be like, okay, yes, the hierarchical definition we found is a sentence. But if I give you a paragraph, you're like, okay, now we've got to step up. This is a paragraph that has sentences in it, that has words or subjects or whatever. And then you have the compiler, and the compiler actually interprets the language. It actually thinks about what you're saying. The human brain does both parsing and compiling at the same time.
Okay.
Which is cool. Because you're thinking, like, if I give you a completely grammatically broken sentence, your brain's going to be like, wait a second,
Right.
that didn't make sense at all. But at the same time, you're still getting some level of interpretation from what I said. Even if it was, even if a sentence was grammatically incorrect, you could still derive a value or a meaning behind that sentence, which you cannot do with a computer program. So, very similar to human language, but again, a well-written programming language will be unambiguous. So that's like the key difference between synthetic and natural languages is that essence of ambiguity. Yeah. So that's my 2 cents about programming languages.
All right.
There actually is a thing in C++ with certain compilers that does have some level of ambiguity to it. It's been named the most vexing parse, and it pops up every once in a while. I tried to understand it via like a 5-minute Google search. It did not yield much, so I can't really explain it. But basically, it causes problems. It won't run a program for you if it sees that there is a most vexing parse in the program you've given it.
Okay.
It will just give up. It will say like, no, I'm not going to do that. So yeah, I think the fact that programming languages are unambiguous. Also, you could speak to LLMs about this. Is kind
speak
of
to them.
You can speak of LLMs in this way as well. You can make an argument that cascades like a trickle down effect to say that they will never actually exhibit natural language
Because they're unambiguous?
Because they're built with programming languages and with that is unambiguous.
How do you explain that they speak in ambiguous terms? Where's the ambiguity coming from?
You want to get into LLMs?
Just do it, man.
Yeah, just for context, you specified that I should look into LLMs.
I did. I want to know about them. I know a little bit about them.
So, yeah. So it's a little tough to go super in depth here because it gets very technical very quickly.
Right.
Because it is on a foundation of math for the most part.
It's a statistical network. It's a network of statistical relation between characters and tokens, such that, and blocks and whatever. It's expanding like infinitely outward, so it's just calculating the most likely thing to follow the things that it's surrounded by, given the context.
Not infinitely outward, but yes.
Really, not in.
No, it can't do that. No.
Okay, fine. Boundedly outward. Because it goes to the letters, and then it goes to the letters that are following those letters, and it keeps calculating that outward. But it also goes to the whatever hypothetical words this could be, and then what words would follow those things, and then into the paragraphs, etc. And it seems like it's going on several levels, stretching outward. It's like, I guess, there was a term that we were using in the infinity and randomness one for like pseudo randomness. Is there a pseudo infinity? Is this seems like it would be that.
It's adequately complex is what I would say. It's not. And it's continually getting more and more complex.
Sure.
But it's not. You could conceive of something being of infinite complexity, which I guess.
That's just us.
Yeah.
I kid. We're not doing this at all. This is not the process by which we do things.
I mean, I would say we're finitely complex, but...
Well, fair enough. But I also don't think that we're working through statistical likelihoods. I think that there's an agency in us that is not in things.
Yeah, I do think that the human brain has a level of randomness that you cannot do with humans. You just can't... Or sorry, what am I saying? You cannot do with computers. So any type of structural model that you have that's supposed to be doing that, it just won't have any type of...
It's a replicate. It's like the prime number thing.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right, by the way, with the LLMs. Tokenization is a big thing. It's basically a hierarchy of tokenization. So you have letters, and you're like, okay, what's the most common letter that would follow this letter?
Right.
Right. But then you can take a step back and say, okay, we have this word. What's the most common word that would come after this?
Right.
And you say, hey, this is a block in a sentence. What's the most
I used
common
the right
block?
term.
Yeah.
Let's go.
That would come after this thing. And it just keeps building out and out and out. And it does that via a ridiculous amount of training data. So you feed it a lot of text and it'll scan the internet for certain things like that to basically just pick up on that, build a big enough model that it seems super realistic. So with enough data, it can very much so seem like you're just speaking to someone, but it is basically just one big prediction model based off of statistical analysis. That's incredibly complex. And they use a fancy term for this. They're called natural nets. It's essentially, this is the cool part, is that they store it in, they store them in geometric structures where they can draw to the closest other structure in that net.
Interesting.
So one of the things that it gave me is that, like, for example, dog will be closer to cat in the net than dog will be to skyscraper. Right? So they're just going to be geometrically closer to each other in that net.
Right.
So it's like you can think of it as like one big matrix, but it'd be like more like a plane than a matrix, but and then however close it is to that, you can make certain statistical decisions to include in that, along with your tokenization patterns and stuff to make like a final conclusion about like what should actually come next.
Right.
Yeah. It's very, very cool. Yeah, and I also was looking into this to see how efficient that was, because I was thinking to myself, like, these are obviously very, very complicated, but the human brain is it more complicated? Is an LLM smarter than a human? I don't know. So I did some rough calculations. Again, these numbers I wouldn't trust 100%, but in essence, I think it said that the human brain, if you were to try and convert it to a number of bits, is 250 petabytes worth of data to store.
Okay.
But again, that's a big range, and it's like you can't even really.
I feel like the way that we do memory is so different.
Yes, it's very different. So like, again, it's not
over,
like.
But we'll roll with it.
It's not an exact one, but it's an estimation of around 250 petabytes.
I do always find the idea of like computers thinking in the way that we think very funny, though, and no one ever finds it as funny as I do. But I think it's hilarious. It's like you're looking up a file in your file explorer, and it's like. I can't remember that one, but like here's a picture of a cat that has something to do with that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but
go on.
Yeah, so in essence, and I thought this was actually a really cool thing as well. So there's estimates on how much storage for example, ChatGPT takes up as a model, and it's roughly 5 exabytes, I think. But if you do some conversions here, it means that one human makes up 5% of ChatGPT in terms of total storage capacity if you're doing this. And again, these numbers are not super perfect. It's really like basically unquantifiable, but we're trying to quantify it, so it's a little spotty. But again, but yeah, that means you need 20 people to make up all of ChatGPT, and that's it. You'd think it'd be a lot more.
Yeah.
However, that speaks to just how much more efficient LLMs are with information than we are. Our brains are terrible when it comes to efficiency of information. And obviously there's a lot more going on. We have emotions, we have a bunch of other parts of our brain that are going on than just a prediction model. So again, there's obviously a lot there, but again, 20 humans to make up all of ChatGPT. ChatGPT is just so much like any LLMs are just much, much more efficient at storing information than we are.
Depends on what you mean by storing information, right? Because we're thinking the way our brains work, we don't tend to pinpoint on or store the smaller, finer points, the details, the numbers, the names, whatever. Mm-hmm. We tend to extract out meaning from things and store the meaning or the sensation. We have a sensation and we get a general message from a thing that we engage in, a book, a movie, a discussion, whatever. Mm-hmm. And we store the sensation and we store the message, the meaning, whatever, and kind of drop everything else off. And there's a sense in which that's more efficient. And it's also interesting because I think like the meaning part is what LLMs don't get. They don't look beyond the surface because they are the surface. And there's sort of an irony in that because at the same time, they're statistically finding relations between, they're like building maps of meaning. But they don't interact with it. They don't interact with the meaning. They only have the finer points and not the big picture. And so I think we're more efficient in the sense that we only keep what we need, which is the meaning and the sensation, and also in the sense that we can actually interact with the information on a level that's not on a level that's beyond the surface.
Right. So you're saying that difference that shows up in there is essentially the background process that gives you original thought.
Well, and this is what I was not what I was leading toward, but this is another thing that I was thinking about too, is that it's like, and I don't think more efficient is a way that I would describe what you're talking about with the difference between LLMs and us, because the problem is I think we can know about as much as an LLM can. Not in terms of raw data, not in terms of finer points of information, but I think we can store about the same level, and I don't want to say that an LLM has wisdom, but about the same level of conceptual knowledge. We just go about it, like we don't have to hold the problem is with the LLMs that they're not actually interacting with anything. For us, it's like conceptually, we're on one point in the middle of a dark space. And as we talk and as we think, as we interact with things and extract meaning and whatever, we are reaching out and building out in all directions from this middle point that we're standing in, and we're creating things. We're paving our own path. We're interacting with language, but not as a perceiver, but as an instantiator, as a determinate force, right? We have the language as a framework, and then we're bending it to our will. We have an inspiration, and then we twist the language to match our inspiration. And so instead of the language pushing inward toward our middle spot, we're pushing outward into the abyss of possibility through our language.
Yeah.
And the LLMs, the reason they look like consciousness, the reason they look like people, is because they have taken the route of just storing so much information, so much conceptual stuff, that like their space that they're in the middle of is already, that canvas is already stretched out from things that humans have thought and said and done. And so they've like preemptively done all the work of reaching out and building and paving and stuff in all directions. Like not infinitely far out, but very far out. And so as we're interacting with it, we're reaching out from the middle, we're paving our roads and whatever. And every spot that we hit is a spot that's already covered in its web because it's gone so far out. But we can keep pushing farther. We can hit new things and we can reach out. We have no limit. And the problem with the LLM is that it's bounded by the limit of things that have already been thought and done.
It's bounded by the limit of humanity itself. What we've been able to do with language, it is bounded by
not
our
even
own
humanity
initial
itself, but
thoughts.
past humanity, because we can push it farther.
Right. Yeah. So, like, you can think of like the way I'm trying to think of this is like a slang term that just like comes about.
Okay.
That doesn't really. It's going to take a second for the LLM to figure out that it means something, right? Because it actually has to be given that information that it does mean something.
Right.
So there's a little bit of a delay there that you get with an LLM that you don't get with humans. It's much quicker. You're punching a hole, not a hole, but you're like punching, making a dent now in that language model that you had before. You're changing fundamentally what the language in its entirety is. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I also thought that this, if you're... I have a very dystopic prediction of the future.
Okay.
which I was speaking
Surely
about
it
this
would be
earlier.
dystopian.
Hmm?
Surely dystopian.
Or is it dystopic?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. I think it is dystopian. But yeah, I tend to have a very dystopian view of the future, and I think that if AI keeps trending the way it is, with that in mind, with your whole principle thing, I think that language as it develops is going to slow, actually, because of humans interacting with AI so much.
Right, it'll
And
stop
speaking
changing
to AI,
as fast.
yes, they're not going to have as many opportunities to make a new thing for the language.
This makes sense. The most it could slow is by half, though, right? Because if you...
Right, yeah.
Because there's still at least you giving new things. Because like we were talking about, we can't bind ourselves to a refined structure in that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if you spend all of your time interacting with ChatGPT, then you've got half of like in any other interaction, there would be two forces continually pushing into the frontier of language, into the linguistic frontier.
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking to ChatGPT, then it's you pushing into the linguistic frontier alone.
Yeah, which I
in
think
an echo
is
chamber,
possible,
which is
but yeah.
right, and you still get half the progress. It's just half.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, I mean, I thought that's...
But that's legit. That's a concern.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll manifest, super explicitly. I don't think it'll be too big of a problem, but yeah, I do think that it will probably happen. And it could cascade into something greater, but I don't think it will.
Another thing with that too is that languages are kind of merging as we get globalization.
Mm-hmm.
All the languages are, well, for one thing, everyone's learning English, but also all the languages are starting to adopt more and more terms from other languages and whatnot. And as that happens, I mean, supposing we end up in a universal language, which seems not unlikely, once that happens, that'll further your point, because like we were talking about, languages, the language you speak and the language you think in does dictate the way that you think and the things that you think and whatever. And so the way that speakers of different languages are pushing into the frontier of language in their own domain is going to be very different, and we're going to be getting farther and into very different parts of that frontier the more diverse our linguistic pool is.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we truncate down to a single universal language, and also as that casts itself into the echo chamber with the LLMs where it's self-referential, then in two ways we get a slowing of development of language. A, because it's going to become more and more unilateral, and B, because, like we talked about, it'll be like we talked about.
it'll be slowing.
Yeah. Like my brain right
now.
now.
Yeah, I'm also in the same boat.
Yes.
Another thing that's interesting is a difference between LLMs and natural language, or humans using natural language,
right,
is that we have access to, like you said, body language and stuff like that. That is essential. And even simple things like one thing that I found interesting is that silence is a form of language in certain contexts. Which you just can't, like,
a linguistic expression.
Yeah, you cannot have an LLM do anything like that.
I don't see why not.
I mean, you
could train it on film.
Yeah, you could do written stuff where it's like,
well, I mean,
it gives a break in the text, but
you're
again,
assuming we're not gonna put LLMs in bodies, which we're already doing. Right? I mean, we've got them speaking very consistently now, very readily, and they do that pretty okay, and they do pause and whatever. They do use silence rhetorically in the way that we do as a linguistic expression.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, they're starting to put them in bodies, which seems like an obviously horrible idea.
Yeah, I guess the principle would still, like the mathematical principle of machine learning still does absolutely apply to
train it on
things
film,
like body language.
Train it on videos of people doing things, and it'll learn to do things in the way that people do things.
I wonder if you took one of those Boston Dynamics like robots that walks around.
I think they've done this.
instead of I think you use machine learning.
Yeah. Well, certainly they've done this.
Well, certainly machine learning, but also like you could play at videos and train a model that would
Right.
like predict it just off of playing videos. I wonder if that's actually possible. I would assume it is.
I think so.
I don't see why not. Yeah, very interesting.
Yep. So on the topic of body language, we were talking about the universal grammar and stuff. We were talking about the innate predisposition for language in people. It seems to me, and I meant to research this, I didn't get around to it. But there are a lot of body language signs also that are universal across like spoken languages and whatever. Like smiling is universally, well, a sign of submission, which a lot of people don't know. Smiling is actually a sign of submission.
Interesting.
Yeah. Which is also why, statistically speaking, men are considered less attractive when they're smiling, just without any other context. Like if you just see a picture of a man who's smiling and a picture of a man who's not smiling and they're the same guy, the one who's not smiling will look more attractive. If you're into men.
I can't speak. Maybe we need a viewer survey or something like that. But I believe you because you've looked into this stuff. So yeah,
I am not gay.
Okay. Cool, man.
Thank you. But yeah. So anyway, so there are lots of universal body language things like that. Also, I would posit that body language, to an extent, is a sort of universal language. And this isn't holistic, right? Because like gesture, like we were talking about with time or whatever, the way that you conceptualize time is different for different people. If I'm talking about the past, I'm going to gesture backward and the future is forward. But there are places that do the opposite of this. There are languages that conceptualize the past forward and the future is back, which is whack.
Bars.
But it's a thing that happens. And so it's not holistic, but threatening, submissive.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing with the spoken language as well. I was mentioning before, I think that you have like these inherent fundamental pieces to your human cognition that come from evolution, just as being a human, that pop up. And I think that body language is absolutely one of those things.
Like how you can tell a question in any language. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that does crop up in every language. So I wonder if that is just I wonder if that extends to any form of communication. Because what other things are there? There's spoken language, there's body language, there's
written word.
Sure, yeah. That works. Written word. Can you get that from there? I don't know, actually. I don't know.
Is it universally recognizable? I feel like surely you would see something and recognize that it is language.
I think that you can. So like if you saw like for example tally marks, like if you're counting for like from like a numeracy perspective, in like if you went into a cave and saw,
as opposed to other perspectives by which you might count.
I was going to say like a prehistoric numeracy type of thing. If you walked into a cave and saw tally marks on the walls, it's pretty universal. Like, okay,
right,
these represent a quantity
1, 2,
of something. Yeah. But I don't know can you say that tally marks are universal? I don't think you can.
Well, and so I mean, here's another. There are places that do their tallies whack. I think in China they draw like a weird little E without the top or something, without the bottom. This one, it's straight. Different places do tallies crazy weird. It's intense.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, so the tally thing brings me to another thing that I wanted to talk about, which is that people will often refer to math as the universal language.
I mean, yeah. So I kind of agree, kind of not. I get what they're going for. For example, like solving the Pythagorean theorem, or discovering the Pythagorean theorem. It's popped up everywhere. I think it popped up in like Mesopotamia or something like really, really early civilizations had found out about the Pythagorean theorem. And they had all come about it in the same way for the most part. Which I give you a diagram, but I don't have a pen and paper. But yeah, they all conceived of it in a very, very similar way to each other. Which is very interesting, because if you're saying that it is inherent, then you could say that math itself is a result of some core thing to humans that sprouts from. Do you think it's correlated to language then? Because if we're saying
I think it
that
is
written
language. I think it's a form of language. I think it's got to be. Because if language is what we use to conceptualize, well, I came up with a thing. Hold on, let me look at my
but
notes.
I feel you can conceive that math exists without language. That's my one problem with that. Like, without language, 1 + 1 still equals 2.
But I think that is language. I think 1 + 1 = 2 is language. Because any way that you conceptualize the one, whether it's a word or an image of a thing or a sign or whatever, any way that you can conceptualize one is language.
Sure, but the actual essence of 1 + 1 = 2 is still preserved even without humanity, I think. Like, that idea is
Based,
still,
I agree.
is
I'm
still
surprised.
kind of preserved in its form. If you're assuming the forms, I think that is still the case. Obviously, if you're talking about the way in which we do it, right? I don't say that successor 1 = 2. That's different, right? It's a little harder. You can still kind of get it. It's, a little different, but like the fact that we say 1 + 1 = 2, and the fact that we can actually translate that to words, obviously is connected to communication and language. But I think that the math itself can very much so, even the rules of the math itself can probably exist without language.
How are the rules of math not language?
Okay, well,
if language serves as a tool by which we interpret, conceptualize, and communicate, by that token, math does all three of those things. Because we interpret the world through mathematical structures. We say we have one thing. We see that we have two things. And we conceptualize the world through mathematical standards. Innovation is this, but also just thinking, what if I had two things? And then we communicate through mathematical things. I need one more thing.
I don't think that... I think you're right. So you said... What did you say? You said communication...
Interpretation, conceptualization, communication.
So interpretation, conceptualization, I think that you use language to do those regarding math. I don't think that math itself is that. I think that you use those two things. You use language to actually perform those two things to the form that is math.
You're saying that the math itself exists a step deeper, just ingrained in the way that things are, and we're just communicating our perception of the way that things are. We're perceiving math. Math exists independent of our perception. We're perceiving it and communicating it through language.
Yes, and language can help with that. But I think it's...
This is interesting. I wasn't expecting you to be such a mathematical realist.
So the reason why I'm fine talking about this again is I mentioned accepting the forms. Obviously, I don't think that like math as we know it exists without humans, but like, because I think it's flawed. I think that math itself is just a flawed system in that it follows from humans, and humans are imperfect. Therefore, math must be imperfect. I think that is like my genuine belief, but if I'm assuming forms here where math is this inherent structure.
So can we agree that if math follows from humans, then it's language?
Yes.
So then the question is, does math exist outside of people? And that seems like a story for another time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if I'm not assuming the forms, or the form of math, like the idea of math.
Mathematical Platonism, I think, is the term.
Some whatever. Yeah, we'll go with that. If I don't assume that, then I think that I would have to say that the two are still completely uncorrelated.
Well, they're not completely uncorrelated in that one is the subject of the other, at least.
Yeah, correlated was not the correct one. I think that I think they're on the same like the hierarchy level. I think are the same. They just happen to have these spindles that end up connecting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Spindles.
I think that's a word.
I'm gonna Google that later.
I believe it is.
I like it. I'll use it if it is.
Anyway, so I don't think that math is a language because I think math can exist outside of language. However, I think that language does influence how we, like, it's basically like language is holding up a magnifying glass to math. Like it can help, or it's like adjusting goggles to make it clearer.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is language, making it clearer, but it still exists even if you're out of focus.
I hear what you're saying. I agree with this. I'm just surprised that you do. This is all very interesting. So here's where I was going with it. Here's what I was thinking about language.
Mm-hmm.
As the start of my system of conceptualization around language that I would like you to help me build.
Okay.
So our first axiom, like we talked about, is that language is necessarily referential. It can't exist in and of itself. It has to exist in reference to something. Language needs a subject in order for it to exist. Just like an experience needs a subject for it to exist.
Mm-hmm.
Second thing is that for something to be language, and I think I'm okay with them being ors and not ands, language is a tool that we use to, like we talked about, interpret, communicate, conceptualize. Interpret, conceptualize, communicate is the order.
Mm-hmm.
And any one of those, if you're using something for one of those things, then I think arguably it becomes language. I think language is the vice by which we do those things. We interpret linguistically, we conceptualize linguistically, and we communicate linguistically. Any means by which you're communicating, insofar as you have metacognition, any means by which you're communicating would be a form of language or whatever, because you're aware of what's going on under there, even if you're making primal expressions or emoting.
Right. So you said so interpretation or communication or
conceptualization.
So you're happy with an or in there?
I think so.
The reason why I might, so do you think a compiler interprets code?
Remind me what the compiler does.
Compiler derives meaning from the parser, and the parser makes sure that the grammar is correct and stuff like that. But do you think that compiler is interpreting the code? Because like if I said, like if I wrote out x equals 2, y equals x plus 2, print y. Very simple. It'll print 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just super simple code. The compiler will read that. Is that reading it and actually knowing what to do and executing it and printing 4? Is that it interpreting it? Or do you think that that's outside the bounds of like true interpretation? Because interpretation, I think, as like a caveat to that, I think interpretation assumes ambiguity.
My first instinct would be to say, no, that doesn't count as interpretation because it's manipulating the information, but it's not actually extracting anything out of it. It's just using it as part of a process instead of internalizing it in any way, which would be part of interpreting to me. But arguably,
so you think that some type of unique thought has to happen from, like, as a result of the listener.
You have to internalize it in some way.
Okay.
It has to go below the surface somehow, which again is why metacognition is a requisite for language.
Okay.
Because if
Would
you don't
you
have...
Okay, would you say that then interpretation must exist with ambiguity then?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I think that you could hypothetically have an unambiguous term, and if you said it, then someone else would still, like, obviously they'll see the term and probably they'll do whatever it is if it's a command or whatever, but they will still they'll interpret a deeper meaning of the thing, even if it's necessarily only one deeper meaning that can be meant. They'll still register that and internalize it and respond to it. Below the surface, it's not mechanical, it's experiential. They'll experience the depth underneath the term, even if the term has a unilateral depth.
Sure. Okay. I think that works, but I think you may have interpreted the question that I was posing a little bit incorrectly, but I also don't think that there even is a way to conceptualize the question that I asked, so I'm just going to roll with it.
All right.
Thinking about it more, I realize that there is no way to actually test that. So yeah, no, not even run a trial of it. It's literally like the conception of it is counterintuitive. It doesn't work. So yeah.
Very curious what it was.
Yeah, so I think I'm on board with your whole interpretation thing. I think it's fine.
Okay.
Communication, I think, is inherent to a level of consciousness, which...
A concern that you could raise with that is emoting, and is there a distinction between humans emoting and humans communicating through language? Is there a difference between language and emoting?
Well, I suppose. Okay, so it depends on what communication is. So,
I mean, both would be
is
communication.
The sun sending radiation barreling towards the Earth, the sun communicating with the Earth?
No.
What's the distinction?
There's no agent. There's no...
So it's reliant on a conscious.
For communication... Well, that's interesting, because then we are suggesting that animals are agents, that animals have consciousness, because...
I mean, I've always assumed...
You would have to, in order for... Well, and I guess if we do the gradient thing,
I think
then it would make sense for the languages also to be gradient. I'm open to this.
Yeah. So you'd have... you could say there's a hierarchy of consciousness, and it branches out in different ways, and you can make tons of metrics. I don't think there even is a super good way of doing that, because I think consciousness kind of changes drastically depending on the actual agent we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think because then dolphins exhibit communication very clearly. They're exhibiting communication, maybe not language by your definition, but you did say or. So are dolphins communicating?
Okay, maybe it does have to be and.
Because I think it would have to be and.
Okay, I'm changing them to ands, yeah.
Because very clearly dolphins are communicating. But
the reason I don't want to use and is because I don't think you have to communicate for it to be language.
I think it is. I think that works. What type of...
Because again, the person in the white room.
What would your conception of a counterexample to that be then?
Person in the white room. Has language, does not use it to communicate.
Right. Well, that's why I think my assumption here that he just doesn't have complex language would kind of...
But I think clearly you do. I mean, you don't even have to go that far. Person alone in the world.
Mm. Well, you could...
Clearly
a person alone in the world could communicate to a tree.
Is it really communication if it's only one way?
I don't know, actually.
I feel like communication implies mutuality.
It's like Castaway, which I've made this reference before, and you've never watched Castaway, but he makes friends with a beach ball called Wilson because it's
I have watched this, just not in decades.
So is
that's not correct. I am 21.
Is Tom Hanks communicating with a beach, like with the volleyball? Is he communicate? Because he's very clearly talking to it.
Right, but no, it's not communication. Like if I want to say that I'm glad that I
You're
was
saying
able to
that there
communicate
has to
something
be
to
a
you, you
second
have
party.
it has to be interpreted for it to be communication. It doesn't have to be interpreted correctly, but it has to be interpreted in some way. Which could also be a justification for talking to LLMs not communication, because it's not interpreted.
I mean, so even with, I'm going to break the causal chain here, but even if I was transported into a universe that has just a solo world, I still have language.
Right.
But I cannot communicate.
Yes.
So yeah, I think you have to drop communication from your ends.
But I do,
because I don't think it's necessary compared to the other ones.
So then language just isn't for communicating. That's a secondary thing. Am I ready to accept that?
It is for communication comes from it, but I think fundamentally
it exists predominantly. It exists categorically for interpretation and conceptualization. Okay, fair enough. So language is for thought. Language is not for communication. It's for thought. Communication comes out of it as a secondary. Yeah, I'm okay with this.
So, and that does back up your man in the white room.
I had pictured it being a woman, but...
Oh. Anyway. Yeah, I think you would... Yeah, I think from that, which I'm willing to agree with to a certain extent. So, yeah, I think that does also back up your claims about the man in the white room. The woman in the white
room. Interesting.
Because if it is purely language exists for thought, and that's it, then yeah, because communication is impossible in the white room.
Right.
And also that means that if language exists for thought and you think that thought can happen, therefore language is very likely to exist. At least, and by your definition, you think it'd be essential to exist.
I think maybe necessarily if metacognitive thought occurs, language manifests, because the way that those thoughts happen have to be through language. Because, like we were talking about with the naming and the categorizing, as you experience those thoughts, you're just going to group them because it's what humans do.
Define metacognitive thought real quick.
Self-referential thought that can recognize and interact with the domain in which the thought is occurring. Right? So lizard brain does not count here.
Yeah.
Feeling hunger and being food does not count as like this sort of thought.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be recognizing.
So, do you think that humans are the only people that can do that?
I don't know. I remember hearing years and years ago that mice can technically have some level of metacognition.
Well, also, I feel like chimpanzees are very.
I don't know.
One of those, like there's a lot of primates that, like, for example, do very complicated things. Like, for example, mourn the dead, which is very maybe it's just because it's proximal to human behavior, and that's why it seems wow, that's crazy that they are mourning their own dead. And I know crows do this as well.
Interesting.
Or I should say corvids. No, I don't know about crows, but corvids broadly I know can exhibit that. So yeah, it's weird. So do you think then that those types of animals exhibit metacognitive thought?
I wonder. Well, I mean, this is a thing that can be studied. This is a thing that certainly is or is not the case, and we know it. I just don't know it.
I see. Well, it'd be kind of difficult to... You'd have to study the outcomes of metacognitive thought and then make an argument that the outcomes are only possible because of
which I think is what they
thought.
do.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how reliable it is, I guess, but...
Yeah.
But for now, I will leave off the necessary... I think metacognition is necessary for language, but I don't think language is necessary for metacognition. I mean, I may think that, but I'm not going to say it right now.
You just said it.
I'll have to figure that out in more detail later as I learn about what creatures are metacognitive.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Well, yeah. So, okay. So yeah, well, you can kind of come to a little bit of a consensus here. Do you think that primates, we'll say, for example, crows, do you think that they can
My favorite primates.
exhibit language? Like, is what they are doing language, or is it just communication?
I don't know. I don't know enough about crows. I would need to. I know that they can. I know you can like free their tongues and then they can speak.
Yeah. Yeah, they can mimic.
Right. And I know that they can do that with some sort of intent. I know that if you give a crow food when it says food
Mhm.
over and over, then it'll come to you and it'll say food and you can Pavlov them.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's coming out of metacognition or if that's coming as like an instinctual response to trained behavior. I'm not sure which of those is the case. I would need to ask someone who knows about
I think
these
it would
things.
be the former. The reason being, I know, for example, crows, if you give them food and are nice to them, they will like bring you gifts.
Right.
They'll just like bring you interesting stuff. Like if
Yeah.
they find a zip tie in the middle of the road, they're like, "Oh my God, look at this thing!" They'll bring it to you because
Yeah.
they think of you fondly, which is cool. Actually,
Right.
it's very, very interesting that they do that because there's no reason for them to do that.
Well, I mean, there's clearly social benefit to building a mutually beneficial relationship.
Yes, but do you think that is lizard brain
Maybe.
happening, or do you think that that's an actual thought of like, oh, I should, like they're having a original thought, oh, I should do this because this will be beneficial to me?
I think there are social creatures that don't have metacognition. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I would totally believe that creatures do favors for each other without a higher level of thought than instinct. I would believe that this happens. I'm not saying it does. I don't know, but
Yeah, again, we have
I think it could.
homework here to do.
Yeah,
that.
we're a little out of my element.
Yeah. Yeah, because I haven't really looked into metacognition as a topic much at all.
Fair enough. Okay, so we go. Language has to be referential, and it has to be used if something is used to interpret or conceptualize, then it is language. This is what language is.
Should we try and piece the conceptualization part? Because we broke communication off. We verified interpretation.
I feel like we kind of did the conceptualization thing earlier with the white room thing with the groups and the expanding and the... We can do it if you want.
Yes, we didn't come to a consensus about that, but I don't think we ever will.
Surely you agree with me.
Well, I don't agree with you on the man in the room.
Right, but on the way, I mean, like, you agree that we think in language.
I think, well, there are people, this has been studied, there are people that don't think in language.
Not spoken language, but I think that the systems by which thought occurs... Maybe I do have to say that that metacognitive thought necessarily manifests language. Because that sort of thought will yield grouping. And grouping is the same thing as naming. And once you're naming, then you've got the base structure of a language. Then you have an association with a term or with a token and a meaning for that token. You've got meaning, and you've got things that represent that meaning that you can invoke to instill it. And that's what language is. So yeah, I think if you're thinking metacognitively, then you have language.
Is that biconditional, or is that just a necessary outcome?
Because if you can't have language without metacognition, I'm going to stick to. So if metacognition, then if language, then metacognition. If metacognition, then language. I think they both work. So yeah.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Yes. Okay. Yeah. 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 I think I don't think that I could come up with a counterexample to that.
And that it may mean that I have to accept that there are other animals that have language, which I don't want to do, but there's not really a reason for that. It's just I just don't feel like it.
Pretty reasonable to say, though, that other animals do exhibit language.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. I just don't like it.
So I think the weird part is then where is the line for animals that can exhibit language? Because
again, metacognition.
Right, but I could ask the same thing. Where's the line for metacognition? That's very...
Whether or not something can perceive its own thoughts. Whether or not you can recognize the thoughts occurring. Can you think about the thinker?
You have a thought of thoughts.
Right. Can you think about the thinker? Can you recognize what's going on in here? The consciousness is... Yeah.
Well, if... With your position on consciousness, I think you would have to say that humans are the only ones. Well, right, because you denied the fact that chimpanzees were conscious, right?
Not necessarily. I don't know if they're...
Okay. If you're agnostic on that.
Sure.
Okay.
If they have metacognition, then maybe they have to have some form of rudimentary language also. And maybe it's the case that metacognition also exists on a gradient. And that the complexity of the language reflects that. I don't know. But I'll acknowledge it as a possibility, even though I don't want to.
I think honestly, the ability to show metacognition is almost like it follows the exact same line to deeming something conscious or not.
I kind of agree.
And if consciousness is a gradient, then metacognition very well might be a gradient as well.
Sure. I think that makes sense.
But if metacognition is a gradient and it's a biconditional with language, then language itself is a gradient.
Yeah. You can have things that are more or less I mean, like, it's just the complexity of the language scales with the... And maybe it's true.
But if by definition, if language has to have interpretability, then interpretability itself...
Right, exists on a gradient.
Also on a gradient.
Yeah, and I mean, this kind of makes sense because the farther you go, there's that transition between emoting and communicating with language. And I think the farther you go along that spectrum, the more detailed you can be, the more specific things get, the farther you get from there being one noise and it meaning something has happened to I am feeling a small pain in my smallest left toe because I have stubbed it recently. Like, huge difference in interpretability and specificity in these things. And so I think that scale between, I think that would happen. I think as you have higher capacity for metacognition, also the extent to which you articulate instead of emote.
It follows the grade of complexity.
Yes.
The level of complexity between the two are congruent.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense.
I agree. But also, I feel like your acceptance of a gradient of consciousness, right, which is one of the fundamental assumptions for all of that.
Right.
Did you not? I think you denied that last time we talked about this. Did you not, or no?
I don't think so.
You were just purely agnostic. You just completely just accepted it.
My thing for consciousness is that consciousness is the thing that experiences. And so then that would be the minimum qualification. That's the necessary condition for consciousness, is that it experiences. And then it can exist on a gradient from there. So you can have things that experience on a super minimal level, on the lowest level of experience, and that you poke it and it feels pain. There's an extent to which you could say, okay, so there's some sort of consciousness in that. It's a very, very, very low level consciousness. Excuse me. And then it goes upward the closer you get to metacognition, and then the farther beyond that you extend, or the farther into that, I suppose. But I'm okay with saying that there's this sort of minimal light of consciousness in things that are like, because clearly there's a difference between a rock and a rabbit.
You know what? That's the conclusion we all need to take away from this is that, a rock is not a rabbit. So, but consciousness is on a scale. But you have like a binary definition for consciousness, but consciousness is
it's either conscious
on a
or it's
gradient.
not. But then it can be more or less conscious.
Is that even possible?
Sure.
I guess.
There are probably
So
things like that.
you would say that the lower bound of consciousness,
There's like
isn't-
zero.
that's non-exclusive. I think that's in the math term. It's like an unbounded interval. The lower bound, but it's not consciousness. But like the second you step up any amount, you fall
Right.
into
So
that
there's like zero
interval.
and it's not conscious, and then you can go up from zero. You
to
can like say you-
0.00001.
or even make it simpler. Say you go from 0 to 1, and then 1 is conscious as your
Mhm.
binary. You've got 0, which is not conscious, and 1, which is conscious. And then you have 2, and it's like, okay, we're still conscious. We're just more conscious.
Right.
And then you have 3, and then
If
you
you
have
had-
4, and it goes on.
if you had the non-negative integers,
Right.
but there's only 1 0. Yeah. Okay. That works. Yes, that does work. It has some weird implications. I would love to write this down
It does have weird implications, and I'm not
and work with it.
100%. Well, I'm not certain that I'm comfortable with saying that animals have consciousness, because I would have to double check that there's no scriptural confliction. No scriptural conflict here. If I'm saying heresy, please correct me. I will stop. I will amend it. But yeah, I would have to cross check these things to double check. But maybe it works. I don't know. But anyway.
So basically, to recap, consciousness is that which experiences.
Yes.
If you're conscious, that is congruent to your metacognition.
If you're conscious to the extent that you have metacognition, if you have a capacity for metacognition, you can only have metacognition.
There's
if
a
you're conscious.
bound of consciousness that you get to that becomes metacognition.
Yeah. I don't know if it necessarily becomes it, but in which it becomes possible. So you can have like your 0, which is not conscious, and then you have like 1 through 10, which does not have metacognition, just lizard brain. And then
But
up
there's
from
a
10,
degree of metacognition that you can.
not
get to.
until 10. And then once you hit 10, then there can be metacognition.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not ready to say that there necessarily is.
What would a difference in a grade of metacognition look like?
Chimps versus us, supposing that they have metacognition. I mean, I know
So,
I guess
but
I
like,
don't
so
know,
the cutoff, if you're saying that the definition is that you have a thought about your own thoughts,
right. You can recognize yourself as an agent, and you think
that seems
about your
fairly
own
binary. It
thinking
seems like
things.
Boolean.
Sure. In the same way that consciousness, right? We have not conscious and then conscious, but then there are extents to which you can be conscious. Same thing with metacognition.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, I don't know how you could, like, what would the difference between 10 and 12 be?
The extent to which you can recognize yourself
Is it
as an
frequency?
agent, the extent to which you can think of yourself as a thinker. I would say more like depth.
I'm not sure how that would manifest.
The amount that you
itself.
can do with it, I don't know exactly. But I mean, clearly, like, assuming that mice have metacognition from that thing that I remember hearing like 10 years ago, clearly we have a greater degree of metacognition than they do, a greater capacity for it. We can think about our thoughts. We perceive our thoughts in more detail. We can think about them in more detail, and we can do more with them. We recognize ourselves as agents to a greater degree than they do. But they still do.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like the focusing thing. It's like focusing a camera lens. You can still see that you're having a thought about a thought.
Ooh, I like this.
But the detail in which you think
Yeah.
about it, the complexity of the thought that you
Right.
have regarding that thought is what develops the gradient.
Perhaps. I like that. That's
Okay.
cool.
that works. I was trying to figure out what you'd actually scale that based off
Mhm.
of beyond the binary. Yeah, okay, I'm fine with that.
Cool. So language has to exist referentially. Language is that which constitutes interpretation and conceptualization. Interpretation or conceptualization.
But not communication.
No, I've dropped it. And so then we get to what it's for, right? And so if language, and this actually, dropping communication helps me here too, because if language is for thinking, if it's for interpreting the world or interpreting experience, if it's for interpreting and then conceptualizing, in that order generally, then it behooves us, then truth becomes a stringent part of language, right? Language exists. Like if the purpose of language is to interpret and to conceptualize, then language is only useful to us insofar as the language is true, insofar as the things that we're thinking and perceiving, the things that we're interpreting and conceptualizing are accurate to reality. Because if they're not, then we're going to run into trouble very, very quickly.
Right, yeah.
And so this suggests that so there's a fun interplay here, and then there's a funny thing.
Okay.
So the fun interplay is that language. So you've got reality, right? Which is not referential.
Referential.
Which is not referential. You've got reality, which is not referential at all. It just is. Reality simply is what is. And then you have language, which is completely referential. It can only refer to what is. It doesn't exist in itself at all. So then you need a bridge between those two things, something that can tie them together. And I would posit that that thing is truth, because truth exists existentially.
Sure, yeah.
Right? Truth is what is. Truth is consistency.
Well, then is it not fair to say that truth and reality are the same thing?
They are inextricably linked,
Yeah.
because to be true is to be in alignment with the divine essence. To be true is to be in alignment with what is. God is being. God is truth. Therefore, truth is being.
Mm-hmm.
But a statement can also be true, right? You can, like, there's the base level true, which is just what is, and then there's the, true in regard to what, right? Because you can say something like then. So you've got reality.
Yeah, like you can conceive
there's a water bottle.
Yeah.
So it is true that there is a water bottle there. This is truth. There is truth and it exists, and the truth is that there is a water bottle there.
Mm-hmm.
But then I can also make a statement. I can say there is a water bottle there. And then that statement can be true or false. The truth refers to the statement that's being made. And so if I were to say there is not a water bottle there, that would be false. There's no truth value to this statement. And so in this way, by this mechanic, the truth then can serve as a bridge between reality and language. Reality, which is existential, language, which is referential. We have truth, which is both existential and referential, to bridge the gap between the two. And the funny thing that we get with this is that it suggests that lies, like, don't really exist linguistically. Lies exist less.
I was going to say, I was going to bring that up. If that's the bridge, then why every time? If you said a false statement.
Right.
How is that possible?
And I came up with a thing for this, but I don't remember what it is. So let me look at my notes.
Okay. Because I guess you could make a statement.
Right, okay.
Hmm.
So here's where I landed on it. Is picked a bad time to get a drink.
ASMR right now.
I keep hitting the cable is what he's getting peeved about if you can't see.
Oh, they can see 100%. They will.
Well, no, I mean, but if they're not watching, then they can't see.
Oh, yeah. If you're listening on Spotify, you cannot see. Just in case
Actually,
you didn't know
Spotify
that.
has the video.
Oh, it does. You may be able to see.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
you could say, okay, hold on. Let me give my two.
Okay. Yeah.
Speaking from your biblical standpoint.
Glad to hear you do it.
Okay, so, well, you said reality is truth,
Yes.
but our reality includes our universe, right?
Yes.
But our universe is tainted by the fall.
Sure.
So something.
Nothing exists perfectly except God, and nothing is perfectly true except God.
Right. But you said reality is truth, and that our universe is part of reality, right?
Right.
Which means our universe is true. But our universe is very clearly tainted by the fall, which means there's instances where it isn't fully true.
Well,
because it isn't
again,
fully good.
This is the true to what thing. Because all of the things that are a manifestation of being, right? And being is God, but none of them be perfectly. And so what they are is a reflection of the divine essence. That's what they are. But they're an imperfect reflection. And so what they ought to be true to is the divine essence. As things that are, they're pointing toward absolute being, but they're not hitting it perfectly. So they're not absolutely true to the divine essence in that sense. Now you can make a statement. You can say nothing in the world is perfect being. And then that statement is true. That statement, we've now transcended the physical plane. And gone into the conceptual. And then we've made a statement that is perfectly true, even though we're referencing things that aren't, which is kind of interesting and fun. But yeah, it's the question of what the truth is referencing. Because if it's the truth of the actual things themselves, then they're not true to their nature in that they are, in that they have fault. But if it's looking at if it's referencing the state of the universe, if we're saying the things are a way, then it is true that things are this way, and that statement is absolutely true.
Right. Sure.
So they're inextricably linked, but they're not. What truth lets us do in a cool way is it lets us zoom in and out. It lets us adjust the resolution of the reality that we're visualizing. Because I lost that thought. It went away.
Yeah, because a lot of true statements pop up with even formal logic that just make no, like, it's true, but it doesn't feel right.
Such as?
Let me think about it. So I could say, yeah, so well, that's not a good example. So it is true to say that if my cat is green, then it will rain.
Right.
Because my cat isn't green. Which means because I know that I can deny the hypothesis of that because my cat is not green. And therefore, whatever I get out of that, it's like almost like it's almost like when you find a contradiction, you can make any truth claim.
Yes.
Yeah. But that whole statement is a true statement.
Right.
Yeah.
Which tracks?
Well, actually, that assumes that my cat isn't green. If my cat was
green,
green,
assume that it won't rain. I don't. That's why. I was going to take issue with the example, but
But you get the point. Like weird stuff pops up with that type of thinking. So yeah. So you okay? So yeah. Okay. So that would. So okay. So remember we were talking about the hierarchy of your. Because you were saying that truth, logic, whatever.
Yeah.
All the things. I don't remember what you call them, but
transcendentals.
Sure.
Yes.
Are on a certain level, right? Like of the hierarchy. Right? You have God, and then you have the transcendentals, and then you have the blah, blah, blah.
God is the transcendentals. The transcendentals are God.
Right, but we got to like at least 3 layers deep before. I believe, at least. The
layers, I think, were... Oh, no, I do remember this. Right, there's God... In terms of descriptions of what we're seeing. This isn't the actual things that exist, because it's all just God. But yes, descriptively, we have God. We have the name that just refers to the absolute thing, God. And then we have more specific labels that refer to either points on the plane that is God, not parts, points of the single part of the plane that is God.
Right.
Or just different labels for God or whatever, however you want to conceptualize it. We haven't landed on one. I'm leaning more toward the points on a plane thing. I think that works better for other things.
Right. We were talking about what is it called? Yeah, we were talking about the point that is the average of all the points. I remember this now.
Yeah.
Basically like a center of mass for all the points.
Would
you then say that whatever tier or whatever order that the transcendentals are on that, the next order down would contain language?
No, next order down is the way. So there's God, there's the things that God are, and really it's only one thing, and it is what God is, because it's God, because it's divine simplicity. But God, things that God are, things that God is.
Right.
God, things that God is, and then the ways in which God is those things. So first order is just the all-inclusive name. Second order is more specific descriptors of the points on the plane. Third order is the way that those things manifest themselves, right? So he is infinitely good. He is infinitely loving. He is eternal being. All of these things, the infinity and the eternal, are third order, because they describe the things that describe him.
Yeah.
And so then fourth order down, it would have to be fourth order. It would have to be after the way that he is his qualities. His quality. And language. So what's your reasoning behind that?
So I was thinking like axiomatically. Is that the word?
That is a word.
Anyway, so if you're starting... It is now. We're expanding language right now. If you start with like that as being an axiom, that truth is connects. What was it? Truth connects language to reality.
Reality, right?
You need truth to then describe language.
Right.
So truth is an axiom for language.
Not truth to describe language. Truth needs to be the subject of language. Language is our way of interacting with truth.
Right, yes. But truth is a necessary condition for language.
Yes, I think that does have to track, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because, right, so
I'm thinking like causal chain type of stuff.
Because only things that are true can really exist, because the less true you are, the less you exist. If something becomes increasingly, like it's like the chaos thing versus order, right? If you the less ordered something becomes, the less instantiated it is in reality, until it becomes pure chaos. There is no order here anymore. Then there's just not a thing. Order is what instantiates being. Order and being are one in the same. And so in the same way, truth. Sorry, it's really late. My trains of thought are stopping like halfway through.
Yeah. Me too.
Shoot. That was going to be good too. What was your question? Do you remember your question?
Well, I had made a statement that truth was a necessary condition for language.
Right. And so...
And you made a statement about you made a statement correlating being and...
Right, being in order, and truth. So, right, truth and being in the same way are necessarily linked. So the less that something is true, the less that it is, in the same way that the less something is ordered, the less that it is. Because truth, being, and order are all,
Yeah. So, but do you have a comment then on if language follows from that and inhibits qualities from that? How do you conceive of false statements then? Because then a false statement exists less than a true statement.
And this is the same thing we were talking about in, which one was it? The consciousness episode? With so. How, like, the more you sin, the less you exist.
Right.
Same sort of thing. And like this does track with, like, the easiest example of this, the easiest way to conceptualize it is with moral goodness, because there is evil. Right? Clearly we see evil occur in the world and whatever, but it doesn't exist in and of itself. Evil is not a thing. Evil is just the absence of good. Mm-hmm. In the same way, an untrue statement. So there are two things that we have to consider. First, we have to set the landscape, and then we can understand how false statements work in the landscape. So, as with all things, people are given free will, right? We're not deterministic machines. We're not bound to love God necessarily. We have a choice. We have a choice to do any of these things. It's not like we can only do good things. We're given a moral landscape, and we can do things that are good, or we can do things that are bad in our moral landscape. And I
will accept this for now.
The more we do
for
things,
the purpose of your
right?
Argument.
The more we do things that are good, the more in alignment with the divine essence we are, and so the more our existence is instantiated. The more we do things that are bad, the less ordered our lives become. The less ordered our existence becomes. The farther we become from the root of all being, and so the less being we embody ourselves. But it has to be a free will decision. We have to be able to choose to walk away from being in this way. And so the same thing with language. When we're given language, we aren't given just solely a compulsory vice by which we necessarily do a single thing that is good and right. We don't, like, everything is made with a purpose. There is a purpose behind everything, an intended use behind everything. But things can be misused. I would posit even that everything that's bad is a misuse of something that is intrinsically good. You have a good thing, someone uses it wrong, and then it's bad. You have a shovel, it digs a hole, that's good. Mm-hmm. Then somebody uses it to whack somebody over the head, that's bad. Now the shovel has become a tool for evil. But the shovel itself is not evil. The shovel is good. It's just the misuse of it that's evil. And that's because it's straying away from its telos. It's straying away from its purpose, which is, again, alignment with the divine essence. All these things work together. And so with language, it's the same way. We're not given we're given a tool, right? Language is a tool that we use to interpret and conceptualize. And so with the tool And with free will comes the option to misuse the tool. And that means that we can use it for things that are bad, for things that are evil, for things that point away from the divine essence, just like the shovel and the whacking over the head. We're given a tool, and that tool casts us into a domain of speech, a domain of language, whatever. What we're given, it's... Scratch that last thing. That meant nothing.
Okay.
Right, we're given a tool to interpret and to conceptualize, but that's the intended use. The intended use is for interpretation and conceptualization, and those things exist in tandem with truth, because only through truth can we properly interpret and conceptualize. Only way it happens functionally. But we can also misuse it. And so really what we've been given is a means by which we can interact with truth, right? Because interpreting and conceptualizing are both just ways that we grasp and internalize and mess with truth. These are ways that we participate in truth. Mm-hmm. And so it makes sense that the same tool by which we participate in truth allows us to distort truth, allows us to mess with it, allows us to tweak it in the same way that all of these other tools, in the same way that our tool that allows us to do moral good also allows us to do evil. The domain, the moral landscape. And so the lies I posit are a misuse of a tool that is inherently good and inherently centered around truth. And yeah, because language is designed to be coherent, a stringent thing about language is that it's coherent. That's the whole thing about language, is it has to be interpretable. And that part of that is order, like we were talking about with your alien question. If there's no order to it, then it can't be interpreted. It's not coherent, which makes it not language. And so the farther you get from truth, the greater a lie your lie is, the less coherent it's going to be, the less interpretable it's going to be. Not least because the very laws by which language functions, the very things that give language its meaning, are part of truth. And so the farther from truth you get, the farther away you get from the structures that make language get at all. Like you can conceptualize a lie going even farther into just like you could have a word that's all consonants, and this would be untrue. It's not true to the structure of language that gives it its meaning. And so the farther into the territory of lie that you get, the farther from language you get. So it does exist less. Lies, the bigger a lie is, the less the lie exists at all, the less of a thing there is there. And this also explains why that, that old adage that like the best lies are built around truth. For that reason, the farther you get from truth, the less coherent it is, the less convincing it is, the less it exists at all.
Well, cool.
I've dumped a lot on you.
Yeah, you cooked. Yeah, I think that works. Yeah, I think I can't necessarily accept certain axioms for obvious reasons that you do, but I think under your own framework that does hold. Yeah.
This is cool.
I'm perfectly happy with that, yeah.
This is very cool.
I do think we should wrap up soon.
Okay.
But I will throw one more thing at you.
All right.
And that's, why does language change over time? Is that in, like you said, the pursuit of being closer to truth itself?
Give me one second. I'm reading through my notes one more time to make sure I didn't miss anything in my theory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because under that framework, I feel like you could make an argument. Well, okay, so when is the time we have been closest to God, to God's intent? And you can make an argument like, okay, was that the perfect time of language because we were closest to the truth because our language was closest to being, like it was closer to a perfect interpretation of truth. Or not interpretation of truth, but like a tool for truth, right? Because if language is a tool and it changes over time, and language's purpose is to kind of like chisel into what truth is.
help us interact with it.
Yeah. The more efficient your language is at doing that, the better the language is. I think that's a pretty okay
Sure.
statement to make. So you could make an argument then that depending on the language at the time and how close it is to being, the more efficient it is at
communicating truth.
communicating
so here's
the
my
truth
question
then.
to you in response is, are you considering ambiguity as contraposed to the efficiency of truth, of the efficiency of interacting, of it's too late for my brain to language.
I actually don't know, because I know what you're talking.
What I'm trying to say is, would a synthetic language then check this box for you? Would a synthetic language be perfectly true?
That's what I was going to say. And I feel like, for example, like just logic. If you're thinking of logic as a language,
sure, first order logic is a language.
Is exactly that. It is probably the closest you can get to being a perfect.
Well, and I'll circle back to the same thing I was saying before, which is that I think, excuse me, I think that those things, like the more tightly bound your language is, and this isn't to say the more ordered it is, because I think you can have something immensely ordered. Like, I think the more ordered you get, the more variety you get in the amount of words you have for things and the amount of ways that you can use those words. The more complex your order is, the more flexibility you have and the more ambiguity comes about, arguably, again, depending on the end of the order. And so this would be I think the synthetic languages, I think the first order logic is the linguistic equivalent to brutalist architecture. I think it's order pointed at order's own. I think it's order pointed to the end of order. It's order for its own sake, instead of for the sake of serving the divine. And that's where you run into problems. That's where you lose the other aspects. And so I think greater order, but order in complexity that allows for the flexibility for us to be able to point toward the divine with our language instead of toward the world. Because my problem, like I was talking about before with the synthetic languages, is that they can only describe things that are finite. They can only describe things that fit within the bounds that are set by them because of their rigidity. And utmost truth, God, is finite and not fully conceivable and does not fit into the bounds of their rigidity. And so,
do you think it falls into a balance then, or the more complex a language gets, the closer it gets to being to truth, or being a perfect, I guess, what do you say? You said connection to truth or communication to truth or something like that.
I don't remember.
Either way, you get what I'm saying.
But I don't think it's about, I mean, it's sort of about the amount of order, in that the more order you have, if it's rightly pointed, the most important thing is the direction, because you can point your order in the wrong direction, i.e. brutalism. But the more order you have, if it's pointed in the right direction, then the better you are and the closer you are to truth. So your order, the amount of order does bring you closer to truth, the amount of complexity, but only if it's pointed in the right direction, only if it's working toward the correct thing. Because you can point your order in different directions. Order pointed toward it. I really like the analogy of brutalism for logic stuff, right? Because even with the function of it, right, brutalism was designed as a sort of yeah, my brain does not word right now. But brutalism was designed in the interest of efficiency, to the end of efficiency, and to an extent to the end of order in itself for its own sake, but to the end of efficiency, right? And the same thing with first order logic. Precision and efficiency is what it's pointed toward, is what it's for. And
efficiency, I don't know, actually.
Maybe.
Because, like, for example, if I'm going to go to math, right? If I wanted to go to, like, lambda calculus is exact. It's basically the first order logic equivalent of that, where everything is a function. But like I can also use traditional math and get stuff across much easier than I can in the other one. So it is more efficient, but it's more complex.
Right.
In that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is the case that I'm making for logic. I think you sacrifice the complexity of an extended vocabulary and an extended way to combine words that mean things. In first order logic, you have a way that you combine your words that means a thing, and you have limited terms set by the bounds of the domain that you're working in. And I think that all of those things, I think that is tuned for efficiency, and I think that's not a good end to have your order be pointed toward.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to I was really expecting this to fall into much more of like a reductionist thing, given that we're talking about language, and language is like, you could make the case that it's a social agreement and whatever, and that it doesn't really, words don't mean anything and whatever. There is no meaning. And I'm surprised you haven't done that. So I want to give you the opportunity if you want.
Well, I mean, fundamentally, I don't think anything, I think generally everything is meaningless because I don't think meaning really exists.
Now we're talking.
But, which I think is fine, but also like if I'm speaking from a practical standpoint, that whole argument goes out the window. I can't make a practical yet reductionist argument. I can't do that. It's not possible. The two are disjoint. So I assumed a non-reductionist framework just to simply have some level of practicality to a discussion about language, because language and humanity are very clearly connected,
right,
and correlated to each other. Like they're tightly wound. But yeah, so if I want to speak about humanity and I'm like, oh well, humanity is just kind of, this whole thing is kind of absurd that humanity exists. You kind of just lose any statement about language because you're just like, oh well, language is also absurd or meaningless. Like you just can't really say anything about it if I assume that. Do I think that's like, I don't know if I can make like any capital T true statement about anything we've spoken about today.
Sure. But you would say that it is capital T true that everything is infinitely reducible.
I don't think so.
Really?
No, I don't think I can make any true statement, which you could say, oh, well, that's your truth statement. But no, I can't do that. That's actually just an inherent thing. That's just an instinctual thing that leads me to believe that nothing can be put to a truth statement. But I'm making a statement about that. But that statement I'm making is lowercase t true because it's my own truth statement. Which is why I think that there cannot, from that you kind of get that there cannot be capital T truth at all.
Yeah, well, so this is going to end up circling back in the same way that it always does if we dive into it. So I won't go that far, but surely you accept that there is a way that things are, and we just may or may not be able to perceive it accurately, but there is some way that things are. There is a reality.
I mean, no and yes, in that I think that the way you're thinking about that is an imperfect form to look at it as, if that makes sense.
Like, even just if the way that things are is a particular arrangement of particles as opposed to another particular arrangement of particles, that, like, there are particles and they must be arranged some way or another. At least probably. There is something, and it must be the way that it is.
Yeah. So, but if I have partly yes, but also you kind of have what I've called in my own thoughts about this the observer problem, in that you have to observe that is, like, if I froze time right now and I said this is how things are, you would need an observer to be like, oh, this is how things are. You can't just I don't know if you could. There's no conceivable truth statement you could make because no one would. It's not possible for anyone to make said truth statement.
Right. So no one can perceive accurately or with 100% certainty the way that things are, but it must still be true that there is a way that things are.
I don't think that is the case.
How? I don't,
Well,
I don't,
you said
again, I don't want to do this so
necessarily
far.
it must happen, but I don't know how that follows from what I said.
Well, because you were saying if you take a freeze frame of a moment,
Mm-hmm.
right, and then you would need an observer to say what way things are, but still, there's a way that things are. When you freeze that frame, all of the particles that exist in a particular place in a particular way, and that just is the case. They don't exist any other way than the way that they exist.
I mean, yeah, like from conceptually, sure, but I also don't think that concept is complete, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think, if that's the case, I don't think no one can, even from like just a purely objective standpoint, I don't know if you could even make that statement. It just does not.
Here's my truth
seem
claim.
like it can.
There must be something, and that thing must be the way that it is.
You're assuming a something.
I am, and this is what brings us back to the Cogito, but yeah, we don't need to go back into the people who've listened to us do our rounds on the Cogito.
Yep. For like 20 minutes, yep.
Yep.
Okay, well,
I'll let it rest.
I'm happy with where we've landed on language. I think we've derived quite a lot.
This was, I feel like we didn't touch on a lot of obvious things that we could have touched on. Like we didn't explore a lot of the regular territory for discussion about language, but I think we hit a lot of our own interesting stuff instead. I think we ended up in fun places that I wasn't expecting, and I got to spit my own little linguistic theory, and I had a good time. I think this was a good one.
Yeah, so I'm very happy.
How would you rate it as compared to the other ones?
To the other podcasts?
Yeah. We've got consciousness, infinity, and randomness, and beauty.
Consciousness is peak. Consciousness was...
Really? You think that's the best one?
I think so.
I think beauty is the best one.
Beauty was the best structure. Consciousness had the best content. But I would say this is like a 7.5, maybe.
Okay.
It's fine. I admittedly, I've been tired, so I apologize.
Yes, me too. Me too.
But I think we hit a lot of good stuff, and I think hopefully people online will agree.
Quite so. All right.
Cool. Well, thank you for listening.